Because the firearms world didn't already have it hard enough on YouTube, a group of senators have decided to take matters into their own hands and personally write a letter to the CEO of YouTube and provide a list of content they believe needs to be eliminated. Stick around to learn more. Hey there, Liberty fam, and welcome back to the channel. Boy, do I have a doozy today for you. As I said in the intro, we have a 5-page letter that a group of blue state senators wrote to YouTube, spearheaded by Connecticut's Richard Dick Blumenthal, taking it upon themselves to be the new YouTube Community Guidelines Police. The letter targets 15 creators specifically, but we all know the entire Second Amendment community will feel the effects. And the best part is they sent it on Valentine's Day with love.
Shouldn't have. You really shouldn't.
But before I read you this letter, a quick word about today's sponsor. I'd like to thank Acre Gold for sponsoring this video. Precious metals are always a good investment, but are an especially good bet right now with the crazy inflation we've been seeing. Of course, with the dollar going wild, that means gold prices are also all over the place. But Acre is offering this really cool new service that is basically a subscription service, but for gold. It starts as low as $50 a month. That money goes into your gold stash, and once the stash reaches the price of one of their gold bars, you get that gold bar shipped right to your door, quiet and discreet. And all for less than the price of a daily cup of coffee. To find out more, go to getacregold.com. Now, let's get into the dirty deets. It starts, Dear Ms. Wojcicki, we write to express our serious concern that YouTube continues to host videos that instruct viewers on how to make and manufacture ghost guns. This content is a clear and direct violation of YouTube's existing community guidelines on firearms, which provide that, quote, content intended to instruct viewers on how to make firearms, ammunition, and certain accessories, or instruct viewers on how to install those accessories is not allowed on YouTube. While we acknowledge and appreciate that YouTube has engaged with congressional staff about this problem and, in recent weeks, removed some of these videos, we are alarmed that an extensive amount of this dangerous content still exists on YouTube. It appears that the steps that YouTube has taken thus far are insufficient. Which brings me to a very, very important question for Pew Pew Tactical and the other folks on this list. And that is, how the hell did you get these videos past the YouTube algorithm? Because I can't even say the word gun without getting dinged. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I now have sponsors, and I thank you for your continued patience and support. Ghost guns are unserialized firearms that anyone could get their hands on without a background check and put together themselves with a 3D printer or a do-it-yourself gun-making kit purchased from an unlicensed dealer. It costs as little as a few $100s to get the tools and parts to construct a ghost gun, and with help from YouTube tutorial videos, can take less than an hour to put together. As a result, ghost guns have become the weapon of choice for gun traffickers and convicted felons, as well as domestic violent extremists and foreign terrorists. Federal, state, and local law enforcement officials have sounded the alarm that these untraceable firearms present a distinct and deadly threat, and have exacerbated the scourge and surge of gun violence that has ravaged communities all across the United States. I'm going to pause here for a moment. First, let us all remember that the files for 3D printed guns are basically public domain at this point and have been released all over the internet. This is not anything that is specific or special to YouTube. They're also notoriously not very reliable, and so I seriously doubt that it is the weapon of choice of gun traffickers. This is not anything that is specific or special to YouTube. I haven't downloaded them personally, but I am willing to bet these schematics come with instructions. And you know, I really doubt that gun traffickers are going to go through all of that trouble when they could just say, call up the ATF. Second, most of the videos that they cite involve 80% lowers, which are perfectly legal. You'll see that list in a minute. It is true that you don't need a background check to buy one, but that is because the ATF doesn't consider them to be firearms, and it is perfectly legal to have one for personal use. So if these senators were going to be logically consistent and not just write a fluff letter for the purpose of virtue signaling to their constituents, their beef would be with the ATF, not YouTube. Nevertheless, these senators call this a legal loophole. Keyword being legal. Perfectly legal. Third, I would like to see the statistics for how many foreign and domestic terrorists are using YouTube instructions for 80% lowers. My guess is that Al-Qaeda is getting more of their weapons from stuff left behind in Afghanistan by Joe Biden than they are from PSA 80% lowers put together with a YouTube tutorial. The letter then mentions an NBC report from December about a letter from Everytown for Gun Safety that claimed there were dozens of gun videos that violated community guidelines on the platform, but they, too, only provided 15 examples. The letter goes on to say that one researcher alone found dozens of additional videos that violated the same community guidelines in under 10 minutes. This is the list they included in the appendix, and spoiler alert, it isn't dozens. The letter also says, in addition, using YouTube's search feature in terms like build pistol, polymer 80, or build 80 would have returned dozens more examples. The titles of these videos alone should have been enough for YouTube to spot and take down these videos on its own. Would have returned more examples is different than did return more examples. They don't provide any proof of these alleged dozens of more examples. After all, even their original dozens was hardly more than a dozen. Now, I know that part might be splitting hairs, but the next paragraph just proves how little they know about how strictly, and often unfairly, YouTube actually enforces these guidelines. And when you're doing something that could hurt someone's livelihood and have broad consequences for an entire community, details matter. That YouTube has community guidelines in place to prohibit content instructing viewers on how to make firearms is a welcome initiative, but these policies must be enforced, and enforced strongly, to make any difference. It cannot be the case that YouTube is entirely reactive, removing these kinds of videos only when news outlets call public attention to violating content, when gun violence prevention advocates send letters listing specific YouTube videos that violate its community guidelines, or when congressional staff reach out to raise concerns about such videos. Well, honestly, congressional staff shouldn't be doing that because free speech, but we digress. YouTube owns and operates its service and bears responsibility for putting a safe product on the market. YouTube must be proactive and take affirmative steps on its own and expeditiously to enforce its community guidelines related to firearms. They might have found these few examples of perfectly legal videos that YouTube would turn its nose up at, but every time I talk about anything relating to gun control, which is allowed under community guidelines and is specifically mentioned as an example of safe content, I get flagged. So I don't want to hear what Senator Blumenthal or Cory Booker think about YouTube guidelines and how they're not being enforced. They then blame these videos for basically all of the violence in the country and demand that YouTube answer for its sins by providing written answers to a list of 7 multi-part questions.
This is not a test, this is war.
These questions ask YouTube to acknowledge that they're violating their own guidelines.
Yes, I'm sorry, Master.
ask to see the steps and methods undertaken to review content on their platform, how they monitor the platform, how the algorithm works, whether or not they audit entire channels if someone has violated the guidelines even once, and other ways they might punish users who might violate guidelines. I'd like to also note here that just because you've been flagged as violating guidelines doesn't actually mean that you've violated guidelines. This determination is made by a machine learning program that, at least on my channel, has proved it hasn't learned shit. The human reviewers, if you're lucky enough to get one, aren't much better. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you might remember that time that a human reviewer decided my critique of a New York Times article was terrorism and hate speech. The letter also demands statistics around how many videos on YouTube are flagged or otherwise identified as violating community guidelines around guns specifically, the number of videos that actually violate those guidelines, and the number of videos that YouTube removes for violating these guidelines. They also ask how long it takes to review flagged videos, which I can tell you personally, it takes a long time. Days, even. Basically, they wait until the initial views are over and your audience just doesn't care anymore. The letter was signed by Senators Blumenthal, Menendez, Murphy, Booker, and Markey. Then they provide a list of videos that they claim violate the guidelines, some of which have a whopping 3,000 views.
Well, I must be stopped.
They link to the channels, by the way, and not even the actual videos. One of these poor guys has only 2,500 subscribers, and the gun grabbers of the Senate are going after him because, despite the fact that the country is going to shit, they apparently have nothing better to do. Some of these videos are already gone, though there's no way to tell if YouTube took action that quickly or if the creators deleted them themselves. Either way, it'll be interesting to see the destruction to gun tubers that this letter brings, because I can almost guarantee that the Second Amendment community will not go unscathed. That's it for today's video. Please like, share, and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and check out today's sponsor. If you want to help out the channel in other ways, you can check out a list of support options down in the description, including Patreon, Subscribestar, and a handy-dandy tip jar. As always, thanks for tuning in, stay safe, and happy shooting.